Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Coalescence Publishing Podcast. I am Kasey Long. Um, if you've listened in the past, you know I have a co-host, Wyatt, really awesome guy. He is not going to be attending tonight due to some work obligations, but we got a pretty exciting episode tonight. We have a guest, Chris Everheart, really accomplished guy, and he is one of our new authors here at Coalescence Publishing. Chris?
Wubba lub dub dub. How's it going?
Oh, another day in paradise, man. You know how it is.
Yeah, well, I'm in Minneapolis and it snowed here overnight, so spring is over for a few days anyway.
Oh, yeah. We had some thunderstorms and a tornado earlier here in
Oh,
Tennessee,
jeez.
so
Yeah, we're not there yet,
no.
but we're all safe. Are you safe?
Oh, yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Tornado hit near the mountains where no one lived, so
Yeah,
no big deal.
right on. That's good news.
Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an award-winning author of more than 20 books, mostly for young readers. That would be chapter books and quite a few graphic novels that were, many of those were published for what they call reluctant and struggling readers. And I've also done some, I guess, what I call long form fiction as well, like the Delphi Trilogy that Coalescence is going to be picking up. And let's see, I've been writing since around the year 2000. And I've had some experience in the publishing business. I kind of know the landscape at least, which is a good thing. And I'm really excited to be with Coalescence. You guys are pretty fired up about getting things going with a few authors, and I'm really just psyched to be on board.
Well, Chris, I think I speak for everyone with the studio. We're really glad to have you on board, man. Um, I feel like you share our image, just wanting to write, just to write and to make it a friendlier and more available, you know, option for writers out there to publish.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I
I,
started at a time
mhm.
before there was Kindle or anything like that. Is when I started, and at that time, the self-publishing was literally you got books printed and you carried them around to bookstores and begged them to put them on the shelf because that was really the only way to get books out there. I don't know about online distribution at that time in 2000 was fairly new. I mean, I remember I don't, Amazon was a bookstore at first, and then they started carrying records and CDs. And then they started offering electronics and that kind of thing. And so that all that was still pretty new when I got started.
It's
So
really
publishing has
interesting.
changed a lot over the years. And, we've had some conversations about that. So it was for me early on. It was write a book, revise it a few times, and send it out to agents and publishers and see if you can get somebody's interest.
I've always, I guess, since I've gotten into the industry and stuff, I never really thought about what it was before we had, digital publishing and self
Hmm.
publishing and all that. That that is pretty interesting because you think of authors like J.R.R. Tolkien, Lovecraft, so on and so forth. They had to get their books out there to so many people before
Hmm.
it got picked up, and now we just send it off at the click of a button.
Right. Yeah,
It's
yeah, that has
crazy.
it. It has its has its downside, but the upside is you can go directly to the audience. You don't need anybody in between anymore to punch your ticket and tell you that your work is good or not, or you just if you're ready to publish, you can hit publish, and that audience also that you need to be successful and solvent as a writer can be a lot smaller than it used to be too, because working writer author these days is making more per book than probably ever before.
Hmm. Now, one question I have for you, Chris. So back before publishing really went digital,
Yeah, back in my
did
day.
back in your day,
That's right. You
did
used to have
you
to crank the car to start it.
um now did you ever get picked up by a publisher in the past?
Well, I did a bunch of contract work for children's book publisher located here in the Twin Cities. There's like two or three publishers around the Minneapolis St. Paul area for some reason. I think one reason is that there's the Twin Cities is a huge education community. There are I don't know, at least a dozen major colleges or universities around here, but the focus on the publishers that I worked for early on. You see, well, let me go even further back. Is the reason I started writing was that I studied art from junior high through college, graduated from college, immediately stopped doing art, found myself creatively frustrated. I wanted to go to film school, but at that time I had a kid at home and house and cars to pay for and stuff. So I really couldn't afford it. I didn't have the time or the money to go to film school, but I'd been saving some ideas for when I would get to make a film and write a script. So what I did was I decided, well, what can I do that doesn't cost anything? And the answer was write a book. So I took an idea that I'd been kicking around and created a adult mass market thriller, political thriller that I worked on for 5 years, but it never went never went anywhere. And the reason is I now realize because it wasn't very good. And during that time, because I was networking a lot with writers and hanging around actually one of the local bookstores here, I bumped into an editor who was the managing editor for one of these kids books publishers, and their whole thing was, they didn't necessarily sell in bookstores. What they did was they created stuff specifically for the school and youth library market. And I got a, I talked to this guy. I went home, had an idea. I wrote a book in a weekend, sent it to him. He didn't like that, but he said, "Hey, I like your writing, so let's come up with some ideas." So basically, he told me what they wanted, and I pitched a few ideas, and we settled on some. So that's how I got rolling, and I found that I really enjoyed writing for youth. Basically, I'm writing to my 12-year-old self, in a lot of ways, and in
Hmm.
some of my other things, I'm writing to my teenage self. So that's kind of the how we got to where I am and why I have so many uh, books that are focused on young adult and middle grade, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And was there a question in there? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I do have a question for you though.
Yeah.
So writing, youth-based books and young adult fantasy and all that. Um, have you had any like really positive experience writing it and any negative experiences writing that?
Best experience I ever had was when I first released the Delphi trilogy. I think it was probably the first book. A a woman who I've known since sixth grade brought her three kids to a book signing at a local bookstore, and her oldest boy, who was 20, I think at that time, was autistic. Pretty severely autistic, and we she introduced us and I signed
Hmm.
books for the kids and they went home. And about a month later, I got a message from her saying that her oldest boy, who was autistic, sat down and read the entire book and loved it. And that was the first book he'd ever read
Wow.
because of his learning disability. And I'm like, okay, well, I can. I can write the rest of my life and never get a better review than that. So I think I'm pretty well set.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
I wasn't expecting that.
I wasn't either. That was pretty remarkable. When you sit down to write, I mean, you're a writer. You're just kind of trying to get a story out there.
Hmm.
It's kind of like this thing's kind of bubbling up, and I need to get it on paper and get it out there, hoping that somebody else will like it. And I'm really, I'm results oriented when it comes to writing in particular. I want to know that somebody's going to read it. Otherwise, to me, there's kind of like, I don't know if it really matters if I write it or finish it. So, but yeah, you never expect something like that. And as far as negative experiences, um, well, and on the writing side, all my negative writing experiences are pretty much self-inflicted. So, I'm one of those artists. If nobody else is around to torture me, then I'll just torture myself if you don't mind. As far as the industry goes, um, I I found the old version of publishing really frustrating, limiting, um, uh, unhealthy for authors. And then, unfortunately, once the self-publishing Kindle and those options kind of came in, again, self-inflicted. I, having grown up, well, I shouldn't say that because a lot of people my age, I'm 53 now, have adapted pretty well to it. I just for some reason, have a hard time really grasping all of those, moving pieces that that uh, um, that authors who are self-publishing and doing well are working on. So that's been kind of a negative experience. Kind of like it went from one extreme to the other. At first there's no opportunity because it was always the old, you gotta, you have to be published to get an agent, and you have to, have an agent to get published. And then later on, it was, and also I was in one of my quitting periods. I actually wrote a whole book about this that I haven't released yet. So, you guys will have to tell me if you want me to release it. But, um, and then I was probably in one of my quitting periods, or I was trying really hard to grasp what was going on with the technology part, and I just couldn't quite get it. So I've had, I can't complain a whole lot. I just I haven't had the level of not so much success and money, but more the level of production that I really would want. I know I'm capable of having written a lot more books than I have. So those are, some of the positive and negatives.
Okay, so looking at today's way of publishing, Chris, what do you think the number one problem is? Do you think it has too much opportunity in it today to really matter to an author? Do you think some authors just get drowned out by the algorithm that's out there?
Well, the shift has happened to where, and by the way, this version of publishing is still really new. I mean, it's just gotten up on its 2 feet, and walking. So it's not in an infant stage anymore, but it's not very old, and that's another reason that I'm excited to be working with you guys, because I think you're getting in at a really exciting time as a publishing studio. Because I think that the publishing studios who are taking advantage of this new way of doing it are, you're the next wave, so to speak, of the new version of publishing. And someday you'll be the established ones, right? And then if there are problems with it, it's that it's more and more a pay to play kind of system now, which is not necessarily bad, right? But there was a time very early on when literally, if you had an ebook out there, it didn't even matter if the cover looked good. Just the fact that there was something out there people would snap it up. And that was, and a lot of authors really got some momentum that way. And then after a while, it was getting a little more, a little more refined as far as the product. Social media coming along was helping uh, authors develop audiences, individually. Uh, and at that time, there were a lot of free promotions and that kind of thing that on Kindle in particular would help authors really come out big and hit bestseller lists with their books. These and over the past few years, it's been shifting to you really have to advertise. You really have to work harder at developing your personal connection with your audience. And again, it doesn't have to be a huge audience, but I think we talked about like 1,000 true fans, didn't we?
Yeah.
That
Hmm.
yeah. So the Kevin Kelly idea, and there's plenty of arguments that about the details of that, but we no longer need a giant bestseller smash hit, right? But what we do need is we need to develop that audience that will regularly and reliably communicate with us and buy what we create. Lately, developing that audience is, you got to put more skin in the game. It literally costs money to put your ads out there
Hmm.
and get featured. And again, not necessarily a bad thing, because when you advertise, you are you are put into an exercise of defining who you are advertising to, right? And that, to me, there's nothing wrong with that, defining who your audience is.
Hmm. And I agree with you in that point. You wouldn't advertise, you know, a kid's book to, someone in their late 40s or
Yeah,
50s
like a
who,
Tom Clancy fan.
yeah.
you know well,
Now,
actually
hmm.
you would, because the parents buy the book.
Ah, good thinking. I didn't even realize
Now,
that.
a middle grade novel or a YA novel, interestingly enough, middle grade in particular, I've heard that it can be a little harder to develop an audience there. Hold on, and sell books. Um, but YA has a lot of crossover, so a lot of adults are buying. I read a lot of YA, so there's some crossover there too.
That's really interesting.
Oh,
So,
hold on.
yeah.
I accidentally unplugged my headphones. So yeah, but again, you still have to. But yeah, you're right. I mean, a person who's reading, you know, uh, Tom Clancy style sweeping political thrillers, whatever, is not going to necessarily pick up a book like the Delphi Trilogy, which is, kind of like a thriller with a paranormal angle, right? A little urban fantasy.
Hmm. Going back to, um, being successful with today's publishing standards and all, I think a lot of it really matters on the type of genre you write and what you're putting out into the marketplace. Um, a quick story to tell you. Back when I was in college, so many years back, I I had a roommate, and you know we both liked to ride and stuff, and we were part of the Writers Guild at the college. Well, he started. This is back when Kindle publishing was really new. I think it might have been out a year, if that. And he started writing, erotica. And
Hmm.
I'm personally not the type of person to write that stuff. Totally for anyone writing it, though. You do you.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Um, but he would write, 5,000 words, a story, and he'd get a story done in like a week. And he would publish it every month as a series on Kindle Publishing.
Hmm.
his first year doing that, he made over $21,000.
Nice.
And I touched base with him earlier this year, and he still does the same strategy,
Yeah.
same stuff. Still, now he does it full time and he
Hmm.
makes a livable wage. And
Yeah.
that's all of our dreams as authors here.
Hmm.
But he doesn't have his stuff edited.
Hmm.
He, uses stock photos for, cover art that he does.
Hmm.
It's all self contained.
Yeah.
And we look at that success and compare it to someone who, another friend of mine spent 3 years working on a fantasy novel, spent $1,000 on a piece of cover art for it,
Hmm.
had it professionally edited. 4 years into the game, they have made probably 100 cells, if that.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you're writing too, I feel like.
I think that's fair. There are some, there are openings in the market here and there when something is new and there's not enough of it. And then that market can mature, and then there's another new thing, right? So it's not unlike in the film business. For a couple few years, there's a huge market for. I do film too, by the way. There's a huge market or a huge demand for low to mid budget horror films, right? And so everybody goes and does that. And then, next year they're like, oh, too many horror films. We need horses on a beach film, and that kind of thing. So um, those do open up occasionally. And then, yeah, obviously there are the perennial money makers like romance and erotica and stuff. But we've been talking about this a little bit about, developing that audience connection too, is that you're more likely to develop an audience if you're already part of a community that is into fantasy, right? Or
Hmm.
into, so for example, let's say I write medieval fantasy or, some version of medieval history fiction, right? So I'm going to have, and I like to go to the Renaissance fairs and that kind of thing. Well, I'm going to naturally have friends who are into that stuff. And, hey, maybe, I'm developing that, already have that social network. And then I say, oh, by the way, I wrote a book, what do you think? And you already have a sort of an audience built in. One good way that I've found to short circuit that and become part of a sort of an existing network or group is something that I know Coalescence is planning on doing, and that's going to Comic Cons.
Yeah, we have our first one planned on May the 13th. We're going to be down
Oh,
at Chattanooga at
okay,
Metro Them Con. And
okay, nice.
it's a multi-genre convention, and the
Mm-hmm.
guys there seem really cool. So we're going to be there May the 13th, 14th, and 15th this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's pretty exciting. But yeah, I agree. You go to places like that, you build that network up, you interact with the people there that already have, somewhat of an interest already,
Mm-hmm.
or similar interest rather.
Right.
And yeah, it can be very beneficial.
Yeah, and I went to, I think it was Chattacon when I lived in Tennessee and had a good time at that. The one that you're, what's it called? One in May.
Metro Them.
Yeah, I think that was one of the newer, the newer one. There had been a new one that had just started. Of course, that was a few years ago. But yeah, maybe I'll come down and visit you guys. I got to make a trip down there someday anyway.
Yeah, I mean, doors open for you. If you want to, just let me know and I'll get you a
Yeah,
weekend pass.
yeah, cool. And
Why?
God, it was
Oh,
such a fun crowd. Love Comic Con, so much fun.
oh, when I would go to conventions, I go to Fanboy Con and here in Knoxville. Well, Fanboy Expo,
Hmm.
and it's just so cool interacting with the vendors. Just
Hmm.
even vendors that you've never even heard of before. Just hearing their story and their interest. That's part of what got me hooked on Lovecraft. Was
Uh-huh.
I met an author who, had some of his books out there, and I read it, and I actually emailed him back, and I'm like, hey, what type of genre is this? You know, because it dealt with cosmic horror and stuff. I've
Yeah.
never heard of that.
Yeah.
And he referred me to Lovecraft,
Yeah.
and that's what started it, man.
Oh
So
oh, and that is a rabbit hole. So good though. Oh my god.
yeah,
Oh man, I was
but
just listening to audio of the horror at Red Hook
oh
last
man,
night, and I was thinking about how I told Wyatt that I was angry that he wasn't going to be on to talk about continue the genre talk that you guys had on the last episode because I'm way into it. But I think what's really interesting about Lovecraft in particular is the buildup is so slow and creepy and interesting all at the same time, you know? So long before anything, quote, happens, it's just the atmosphere that he builds just with
mm-hmm.
the way he words things and the stuff he talks about is the angle that he comes to these things at was just so good.
Oh yeah, and for the time, you know, it was very bizarre,
Mm-hmm.
but my favorite story from Lovecraft is the Cats of Ulthar, and it is so creepy.
I'm not
You
familiar with
know,
that one.
it basically takes place in this village, and you know, there's some weird things going on with the cats going missing in this town, and they, you know, it all builds up to the people in this cottage that cats are going into. They're killing them or doing something with them,
Ugh.
and basically it all ends with the cats coming back and eating the people. It's so great, you
Yeah.
know. Never expected it,
Yeah.
but
Mm, I love that
speaking
stuff.
of Wyatt, he did want me to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let me see here. So, since a lot of your work deals with, you know, YA, and we've talked about your experiences with it, what
Mhm.
do you think it could look like in the future?
YA in particular.
Yeah.
Uh, I, I'm thinking back right now as I think over some of the YA stuff that I've read in the last few years, and it's interesting because when I graduated from high school in 1986, there wasn't much YA literature. S.E. Hinton had The Outsiders, and there was uh, Catcher in the Rye, and some of that stuff. But there wasn't, uh, it wasn't like James Patterson. There wasn't a James Patterson cranking out YA like he has the last few years, and so the subject matter is really evolved and matured as I think as its own genre, so to speak. And haven't haven't thought much about this, so I'm kind of winging it right now. But I think over books like and then there's books like The Giver, which are arguably pretty literary, um, and Harry Potter really tore things open because that first book really was an eye opener to where the author was putting the kid in real danger. So that, not that the outsiders didn't. I mean, they were trying to kill each other, but Lord of the Flies, that was the other classic.
Hmm.
Um, and then, so in the last few years, like 10, 15 years ago or so, um, it really, really interesting plots, themes, storylines started to come out, like Unwind by Neil Shusterman, which is basically the premise is that it's in the near future after a civil war had been fought in the United States and one of the main issues was abortion. And the compromise is that any child can be aborted for any reason up until they're 18 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
That What?
Yeah, and we are. I mean, that is, and then you take things like, of course, the Katniss Everdeen, the, the Hunger Games,
Oh,
right? I
mm-hmm,
mean, those are
mm-hmm.
really, really high concept stories, that have seriously high stakes for the characters. So, you take something like a super high concept, and then you put like a Lord of the Flies type of danger element into it. Lord of the Flies arguably fairly realistic, um, and we're maturing into some really really interesting plots and storylines and themes. And in fact, the new project I'm working on for you guys is, and either I'm breaking new ground, or it's been done before and it's going to look like hack material. I don't know, but we're going to find out. But the idea is that, um, those of us working in the genre of YA are able to really draw out some really deep and interesting plots and themes that not only connect with a teenager's sensibility about their place in the world, right, but also, kind of expand into the adult and general society themes, right? I mean, Schusterman's idea about abortion is like mind blowing, but if you think about it, it's like um, that concept gets to the heart of a teenager feeling like they don't belong, like their parents don't trust them, and vice versa, right? And it really really teases out, I think, a lot more of the deeper human themes. And I think that YA is going to continue to mature in that way, and we might even see some really truly, quote unquote, great literature come out of it. I mean, I'm not a literature guy, but I love stories, So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
Now,
going to be really interesting.
one thing I've noticed over the past few years, we have a Books a Million, at the mall where I
Oh yeah,
live,
I used to hang
and
around Books a Million all the time. That was my home away from home.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Books a
I
Million,
go
Johnson
there.
City, shout out, woo woo.
Uh-oh, Books a Million, Morristown, Tennessee, shout out.
That's right.
Uh, Now, I will say, a few years back when I'd go to Books a Million, you know how they have everything separated by genre and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
They did not have a young adult section,
Mm.
but now they do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you'll find Hunger Games,
Mm-hmm.
The Maze Runner,
Yeah.
you know, and all these Twilight, for example. Twilight,
Mm-hmm.
took off.
Yep.
And you'll find all of these books there that have been written fairly recently. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so amazing how quick it has turned into a very prominent genre.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's exploded in the last like 15 years.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's just,
But one day I'm going to try to get a podcast together with you and someone else. Her name's Fanny Price.
yeah,
She
I heard your
is,
interview with her.
yeah,
Loved her.
she's very
She's awesome.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, Fanny. You
Hi,
are
Fanny.
awesome.
You are.
Um, I'm going to reach out and message her and see if we can get her on here next time and
Yeah.
talk
Anytime.
about some more YA stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
I like that.
Chris, I think we're going to call it there. You know,
Alrighty.
I
Well, it's
am.
good hanging with you for a little while. I'm looking forward to doing it again. Pencil me in for any and all future episodes.
Yeah, man. Me and Juan would be happy to have you. I've been
Mm-hmm.
wanting to expand what we talk about with this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I think having more guests and stuff on there would be part of that process. So,
Yeah, and it's I listen to a couple podcasts where it's groups of writers and publishers just talking about what's going on and themes as well. And I have a very small group of authors that I meet up with here in town once in a while, and it's just so nice to be able to sit and talk about this stuff with somebody who is kind of on the inside and gets it. I think it's a really important. So having this on a more regular basis would be great.
I've always been an advocate of talking about the things you love with people that also share it.
Yeah.
Um, back when I was in college, real quick, we didn't have an English club.
Mm,
And I spoke with my English professor, and she's like, "Well, there's no one here that really likes Shakespeare." And I'm like, "Well, they don't have to like Shakespeare
yeah.
to be in the English club." And
Right.
we worked out the details, and we started the Word Up Club. Shout out to Walter State Community College here in Tennessee.
Mm,
Um, and we got a lot of people that were interested in poetry, modern writing, and stuff, and we would meet on a weekly basis talking
mm,
about that.
yeah.
And it a lot of them went on to be published authors now.
Cool.
So I feel like talking about stuff with people that share your interest will help you brainstorm, and it also helps you network with people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Agreed.
well, hey man, I loved having you on the podcast tonight. I'm definitely gonna bring you on to the next one.
Sweet.
And
Looking forward to
to all you all listening out there, to all you all, that's my southern coming out.
it. Have you
I
come up with a name for the Coalescence fans yet?
coalesces. I
Coalesces.
coalesces.
All right. I
Yep.
like it.
I just came up with that.
Lessor or lessee?
Ooh, I need to brainstorm on that one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I was
I
also I like to hear the announcement that you're what was it over 1,500 followers?
Yeah, we reached 1,500 followers. I would like to give a special shout out to our very own E. Marie. She is awesome. She's been
Way
helping manage
to
our
go.
Twitter,
Yeah, nice work.
and she, has kind of taken the foundation that we gave her, and she has done nothing but build upon it. So,
Sweet. Yeah, she gets the air horn of appreciation.
oh man, yeah,
And
I
also
could.
I'm making the trucker, pulling the horn thing while I do that, by the way. You can't just make the sound. You got to pump the arm at the same time.
You know, when I was young, I was riding with my mother, and I did that same thing, but to a police officer that was near us, and he pulled us over.
Way to go, man.
Yeah, he was cool about it and all
Yeah.
that, but yeah, he thought I was in danger, was making a
Oh.
signal. My mom was just
and
like,
all and also the fact that you'd scribbled "help me" in the fog on the mirror. That's funny.
"Oh man." Well, I want to go ahead and pop on out of here. All you guys listening in, thanks for tuning in. We'll try to do these podcasts on a more regular basis. That's been a goal of mine for a bit. Just working with people's schedules. So,
All right. Have a great day.
all right, you too, Chris. See ya.
Bye now.